Hello, my name is Norbert, and now I'm going to showcase to you the system architecture for Aristotle agent here. So first, we actually have the UI, which we use as the VS Code extension, as you saw in the other video. And then the Aristotle agent here uses the LLM, which we actually use Llama 3.1, but it could be anything since Aristotle is a framework for a large language model RAG query for code bases. And actually, we have some knowledge-based systems here as well, and some tools that the agent will be able to use that we can describe later. And then we have some knowledge graph database, which we use as Neo4j, and VectorDB, which we use with FICE. And then we have some pipelines for code-based loading, as well as pipeline for searching relationships from code bases that has already been loaded. And now I'm going to describe to you the pipeline number 1 and pipeline number 2. So for the first pipeline here, it's actually when the user asks either specific or general questions to Aristotle regarding code bases that have already been loaded and parsed into the knowledge graph in VectorDB. So here, the UI will send the message to Aristotle agent here, and our agent will actually make a query to the combined search tool at first. And the combined search tool will then actually search using the KG and vector here. So combining them both together, KG here search from the graph database, which we use for Neo4j, and vector search here will use the VectorDB using semantic search as well. And essentially, both of KG and vector search here will be filtered. The results will be combined and filtered in our knowledge-based system results filter here, and it will be later ranked for the Aristotle agent to actually think and process what to do next and what to answer. Now, the thing is that for specific searches, sometimes it's not enough, and sometimes the user even asks specific questions about specific objects, a specific class, for example. So in that case, we have this right here. The Aristotle agent can also use the entity relationship search tool, in which the agent just have to pass in the code base name, entity, and relationships here, and that the tool will pass it to the relationships validator, which is a knowledge-based system to validate, for example, a class cannot, for example, have a function, or a class, for example, a function, for example, cannot inherit another function. Something like that, we programmers would know, but local large language models may hallucinate and put that in as entity and relationship, which is not good. So entity relationship validator here can give feedback to the agent for it to fix its own query. So that's the knowledge-based system, and here we do actually the same thing as before. We do KG and vector search, and then we combine them and filter them together. Now for the second pipeline, it's actually when the user asks Aristotle to load code base. So if the user, for example, gives a Git repository URL or PyPy package name, it will be passed into the load codebase tool, which the agent will use, and the tool will then pass all source code files, all .py and IPYNB files, into the code parser. Will generate the abstract syntax tree, and the AST traverser here will traverse that tree and generate the triplets for the crazy query manager to then insert as nodes and relationships to the knowledge graph database, which is Neo4j. And all the markdown files will be split into chunks, and the chunks will then be embedded and coded, and then the embedded data will be stored in the VectorDB for later searches and vector search. Now, if the user, for example, wants to load a context file or their own current code workspace, then the UI will actually pass all the source code files and markdown files, and will essentially do the same thing with AST and documentations here with code parser and markdown file, and eventually insert them into the KG and VectorDB as well. Here, for the details of the implementation in the codebase instead, we actually have two folders. The first one is the system folder, which describes all the agent and all the tools. So here, for example, we have the system prompt and the agent, and we have the schemas for the tools, all the tools there. Also, more tools here for searching. And then here we have the graph database, which we use actually Graffiti to insert with temporal knowledge as well. And here for the vector database, we use FICE. And here we have the encoder for the VectorDB and the split markdown function as well. We have some functions here for the query filter and the relationship validator, as you just mentioned. Which makes up the knowledge-based system here, and the repository loader here we accept Git URLs and PyPy package name as well, which will be resolved into Git URLs. And actually, whenever the user wants to load a code base, it will be loaded here and locally, and we'll be able to parse the files and load the files there into the both of the DBs as well. And here we have some server here that accepts the chat from the user, as well as load request files as well, and the types. And here we have some tests as well to make sure that whenever we refactor the code base parser or the AST parser, which is over here. So this is the code base parser for parsing the code bases, which uses actually the AST traverser here to traverse all the nodes and trees and process all the triplets to get us all the list of nodes and relationships for the knowledge to be inserted for the knowledge graph as well. Another part is actually the UI itself, and for the UI, we've demonstrated it in the other video, which actually just looks something like this. And we essentially have a UI here for chat. Here's some workspace. This is for the API integration with the backend, and we wrote it in TypeScript. And to maintain all the states for chat IDs as well, to keep up the history. And the chat will actually send all the history every time we chat. That way it reduces hallucinations for the large language model, since we are using a local large language model in Olama, which is prone to hallucination. So instead of trying to actually use bigger models to combat hallucinations such as GPT-5 or Claude, we actually attempted to use local models and implement knowledge-based systems and everything else to reduce hallucinations and try to produce the output using the RAG system as well.